The journey begins on the familiar, rain-slicked rooftops of Empire City, but the air no longer feels like home. It is a city that has been through a war, and the atmosphere is one of a tired peace. This part of the history is a story of the beginning of the end, a realization that the peace Cole won from Kessler was only a short breath before a much larger storm. The air here is cold and heavy, smelling of wet brick, old smoke, and the sharp, metallic tang of the ocean. The sound of the world is a low and constant hum, as the city tries to rebuild itself among the ruins of the blast. Cole stands on the edge of a tall building, his fingers dancing with a soft blue light that looks like a trapped star. He realizes that the weight he carries isn't just the electricity in his veins, but the knowledge of the beast, a monster of fire that is moving toward them with every passing second. As Cole looks out over the bay, the atmosphere shifts to one of imminent dread. He sees the horizon beginning to glow with a sickly red heat, a sign that the beast has finally arrived to claim the city. This is the era of the first contact, where the atmosphere is one of powerless observation and raw fear. You see the way the birds flee the coast, and the way the water begins to churn, as if something massive is walking beneath the waves. This part of the history is a story of the unstoppable force, a realization that for all his power, Cole is about to face something that doesn't care about his lightning. The sound of the first explosion at the docks is a deep and final thud, a sign that the safety of the city is gone forever. Cole moves with a fast and determined might, his boots grinding against the gravel of the roof as the red light of the horizon begins to swallow the blue of the sky. The fight on the pier is a story of the David and the mountain. Cole stands on the wooden planks as the beast rises from the water, a giant made of cooling lava and white-hot embers. The atmosphere is scorched and violent, as the heat from the monster turns the falling rain into a thick, choking steam. This is the trial of the first stand, where the atmosphere becomes one of physical impact and blinding heat. Cole throws everything he has, bolts of lightning, waves of shock, and heavy grenades of energy. But the beast just keeps walking. The sound of the lightning hitting the monster's chest is a sharp and sizzling snap, making the pier feel like it is melting into the sea. This part of the history is a realization that to save the world, Cole needs more than just what he is now. He needs to grow. He feels the singing heat on the skin and the dry pressure in the lungs, a feeling of total and scorching focus. Deep within the chaos of the collapsing docks, the atmosphere becomes hectic and fragile. Cole is knocked back by a wave of fire, his body hitting the cold water with a heavy and muffled splash. This is the moment of the great defeat, where the atmosphere becomes one of physical weakness and sinking hope. He watches as the beast tears through the city he fought so hard to protect, a realization that Empire City is lost. The sound of the skyscrapers falling in the distance is a low and grinding roar, making the water feel like the inside of a shaking drum. This part of the history is a realization that survival is the only goal left. He feels the icy chill of the bay and the flickering pulse of the spark, a feeling of total and drowning determination. Leaving the burning city behind, the journey moves to the deck of a small escape boat, heading south toward New Marais. The atmosphere is somber, quiet, and exhausted, a realization that the world as Cole knew it has ended. This part of the history is a story of the long retreat, where the atmosphere is one of deep blue evening and soft waves. You see the way the smoke from Empire City follows them like a black ghost, a reminder of everyone who couldn't get out. The air is still and carries the taste of salt and burnt plastic. The sound of the boat's engine is a steady and rhythmic thrum, signaling that the path to the south is the only way to find the strength to fight back. Cole sits in the back of the boat, his hands cold and his eyes fixed on the red glow behind them. The arrival at the outskirts of the southern coast is a story of the shifting climate. You encounter the first signs of the marshland, where the trees grow out of the water, and the air becomes thick and sweet with the smell of damp earth and blooming lilies. This is a moment of raw and natural transition. The atmosphere is heavy and golden, a realization that the rules of the North do not apply here. This part of the history is a story of the new frontier, where Cole must learn to navigate a world made of wood and mud instead of stone and steel. The sound of the crickets in the tall grass is a high and constant drone, making Cole feel solid and out of place in the humid air. He moves with a slow and measured step, his staff leaning against the wooden railing as he prepares his heart for a new kind of struggle. Deep in the heart of the first swamp camp, the final trial of the transition takes place in a chamber of pure humidity. The atmosphere is thick and blinding, a realization that the heat is a new kind of enemy that saps the warrior's strength. This is a story of the sovereignty of the breath, where Cole must find the internal coolness to keep moving when the air feels like a hot blanket. The fight is a moment of psychological impact, as Cole faces the memory of the people he left behind, while the boat pushes deeper into the green dark. The sound of the water hitting the hull is a single and deep note, signaling that the true journey has finally begun. The experience of the flight from the north ends with Cole standing at the bow of the boat, looking at the first lights of New Marais flickering through the trees. The fire of the beast has led to a sovereignty of the need. He carries the weight of the fallen city and the silence of the ocean. The atmosphere is one of quiet and grounded resolve, a realization that the path to the end is a path of finding the power that Kessler promised him. The focus would now shift to the Ascension Parish, as the history prepared to follow the trail of Dr. Wolf into the world of the Southern secrets and the final evolution of the Lightning. The final legacy of the departure from Empire City is a story of the beauty in the survival. You have seen the warrior walk through the fire and the water to find the strength to keep his eyes open. You have felt the sting of the defeat and the weight of the journey. As the red light of the north fades behind you and the first yellow light of the south appears on the horizon, you feel a sense of simple and sacred purpose. The story of the lightning finds its final and grounded resolution in the first breath of the swamp air, leaving behind the ruins for a world of mud, mystery, and the journey that continues to rise. The journey moves deeper into the humid heart of the south as the boat finally pulls into the docks of the Ascension Parish in New Marais. This is a world of old stone walls covered in ivy, narrow cobblestone streets, and the constant, heavy feeling of the sun beating down on the mud. This part of the history is a story of the militia, a group of local soldiers led by a man named Joseph Bertrand, who has turned the city into a fortress. They do not like outsiders, and they especially do not like people with powers. The air here is thick and tastes of salt, spicy food, and the damp smell of the river. The sound of the world is a constant mix of distant jazz music from the plazas and the sharp, rhythmic marching of boots on the pavement. Cole steps onto the wooden pier, his hands feeling the tingle of the local power grid, realizing that while Empire City was a place of tall towers, New Marais is a place of deep shadows and old secrets. The walk through the colorful streets of the parish is a story of the hidden eyes. The houses have beautiful iron balconies and bright paint, but the windows are shuttered and the people watch from the darkness inside. Cole has to move carefully, using the power lines to stay above the street where the militia patrols are looking for any sign of trouble. This is a moment of total and grounded focus. The only sound is the buzzing of the insects and the low hum of the electric wires as Cole slides along them like a blue spark. He feels the sticky heat on his skin and the weight of the heavy air in his lungs. This part of the history is a realization that in New Marais, you are never truly alone. He finds a small electrical box near a closed cafe and drains the energy, feeling the warmth of the current move through his arms and settle in his chest. The blue light from his hands shows the detail of the old brickwork, turning the alley into a glowing path of silver and shadow. In the middle of a busy square, Cole finds himself in his first real fight with the militia. These men wear red and white uniforms and carry heavy rifles, using sandbags and old cars to block the way. The fight is a story of the lightning against the wall of iron. The soldiers fire shots that ring out with a sharp, cracking sound, echoing off the walls of the old cathedral. Cole has to use his shockwaves to push back the attackers, sending them stumbling into the fountains and the flower stalls. He has to decide if he will use his power to protect the civilians who are caught in the middle, or if he will focus only on reaching the warehouse where Dr. Wolf is hiding. The sound of the bullets hitting the stone is a constant, rhythmic tapping that keeps his heart racing. When the last soldier is down, the square falls into a sudden and heavy silence, the only sound being the splashing of the water in the fountain. The journey leads to a large, dusty laboratory hidden in the back of an old clock factory. This is where Cole finally meets Dr. Wolf, the man who helped create the Ray sphere and knows how to unlock the rest of Cole's potential. The room is filled with humming machines, glowing blue tubes, and stacks of old papers that smell like dust and ink. This part of the history is a story of the missing pieces. Wolf explains that Cole needs to find blast cores, small crystals of pure energy, to make his body strong enough to face the beast. The air is still and tastes like ozone and copper. Cole looks at the strange machines and feels a sense of quiet and steady hope, a realization that there is a way to win. He feels the hardness of the metal floor under his boots and the vibration of the equipment in the air. This part of the history is a realization that his power is a machine that he is just starting to understand. Deep in the heart of the city, the militia unleashes a new weapon to stop Cole. It is a giant machine with a searchlight that can track him across the rooftops, firing beams of hot energy that turn the wood to ash. The fight is a story of the spark against the searchlight. Cole has to stay in the shadows, moving through the dark alleys and behind the stone chimneys to get close to the machine. The atmosphere is tense and bright, with the white light of the tower cutting through the purple evening sky. He uses a massive bolt of lightning to short-circuit the lens, watching as the glass shatters and the light goes dark. The sound of the explosion is a deep and final boom that clears the street. When the smoke settles, Cole is left standing on a balcony, his breath coming in slow, steady waves as he watches the city's lights flicker and return, leaving the factory behind. Cole walks through a small cemetery where the stone tombs are stacked on top of each other because the ground is too wet to bury the dead. He encounters a group of people who are hiding from the militia, their faces pale and tired in the moonlight. They look at him not as a monster, but as a protector. He reaches out and touches a broken lantern on a gate, filling it with a soft, blue glow that lights up the path for them. This is a moment of simple and grounded peace. The atmosphere is cool and quiet, a realization that even in a city ruled by fear, a small light can mean everything. He feels the cold stone of the tomb under his hand and the softness of the moss on the walls. This part of the history is a realization that he is fighting for more than just survival. He is fighting for the right of these people to walk the streets without hiding. The experience in the first district of the South ends with Cole standing at the very top of a cathedral spire, looking out toward the dark swamp that surrounds the city. The moss and the stone have taught him that New Marais is a place where everything is connected, from the old stories to the new powers. He carries the weight of the blast cores he needs to find and the memory of the city he lost. The atmosphere is one of quiet and steady resolve, a realization that the real work is just beginning. He is no longer just a refugee. He is a warrior of the South. The focus now shifts to the flooded marshes and the secret laboratory hidden deep in the mud. Cole prepares himself for the next step of the journey, listening to the low, distant croaking of the frogs in the tall grass. The final legacy of the first days in New Marais is a story of the light that refuses to be put out by the rain. You have seen the warrior walk through the cobblestones and the fire to find the strength within his own heart. You have felt the sting of the heat and the weight of the city's secrets. As the yellow light of the parish fades into a deep blue night and the story of the second district begins to take shape, you feel a sense of simple and sacred purpose. The journey has brought him to a place of history and mystery, and he is ready to see what is hidden in the dark. Cole steps away from the spire, his boots making a soft sound on the stone as he heads back down into the street, ready to follow the lightning wherever it leads. The journey leaves the dry stones of the city behind and enters the swamp district, a place where the world feels like it is made of green shadows and slow, moving water. This is the edge of New Marais, where the land gives up and becomes a maze of thick mud, cypress knees, and half-sunken shacks that lean into each other for support. This part of the history is a story of the deep wild, a realization that the blast from the north has sent out ripples that have changed the very nature of the earth. The air here is heavy and wet, smelling of damp moss, old wood, and the thick, sweet scent of flowers that only bloom in the dark. The sound of the world is a constant, low chorus of insects and the splashing of heavy things moving through the reeds. Cole walks along the narrow wooden piers, his boots making a hollow, wet sound on the planks. He realizes that while the city was a place of men and guns, the swamp is a place where the rules of life have been twisted into something new and strange. The walk through the flooded marsh is a story of the careful step. The paths are made of rusted metal sheets and rotting logs that float on the surface of the black water. Cole has to stay balanced, knowing that if he falls into the water, his own power could turn against him in the wet dark. This is a moment of total and grounded focus. The only sound is the occasional croak of a bullfrog and the soft hum of the blue light reflecting off the surface of the swamp. He feels the sticky humidity on his skin and the pressure of the thick air in his lungs. This part of the history is a realization that in the deep mud, the earth is always trying to pull you down. He finds an old, rusted transformer sitting on a pole in the middle of a clearing and drains the energy, feeling the spark jump through his chest like a quick heartbeat. The light from his hands turns the moss into a glowing silver carpet, showing the way through the tangled vines. In the middle of a clearing filled with dead trees, Cole encounters the first of the corrupted. These are not men with guns, but creatures that have been changed by the infection, their bodies large and twisted with skin like tree bark, and eyes that glow with a sick yellow light. The fight is a story of the lightning against the rot. The creatures move with a fast, jerky grace, spitting clouds of acid that hiss when they hit the wooden platforms. Cole has to stay moving, jumping from one mossy log to another, while firing bolts of blue energy that tear through the thick mist. The sound of the lightning hitting the creatures is a sharp, sizzling crack that echoes through the trees. He has to decide if he will use his power to clear a path for a group of trapped scavengers, or if he will focus only on the blast core, hidden in the wreckage of a crashed helicopter. When the last creature falls back into the mud, the swamp becomes suddenly quiet, the only sound being the slow bubbling of the water. The journey leads to a hidden laboratory built inside the rusted hull of an old cargo plane that crashed years ago. This is where the militia has been hiding a stolen blast core, trying to study its energy before Cole can get to it. The inside of the plane is a maze of wires, computer screens, and cold metal walls that hum with a strange power. This part of the history is a story of the stolen fire. Cole finds the crystal sitting in a glass case, its orange light pulsing like a small sun in the center of the dark room. The air tastes like copper and burnt plastic. He looks at the core and feels the pull of its energy, a realization that this small stone is the key to his survival. He feels the vibration of the plane's floor under his boots and the electric tingle in the air around the case. This part of the history is a realization that the power he seeks is something that was never meant for human hands. Deep in the heart of the marsh, the militia arrives to take back the core, using motorboats and heavy machine guns to surround the plane. The fight is a story of the spark against the steel. Cole has to defend the hull, firing bolts of lightning into the water to disable the boats, and tossing grenades of energy to blow the engines apart. The atmosphere is loud and frantic, with the sound of metal tearing and water splashing as the boats flip over in the waves. He uses a massive blast of power to push back a wave of soldiers, watching as the blue light clears a wide circle in the mist. The sound of the final engine dying is a deep and resonant silence that settles over the swamp. When the smoke clears, Cole is left standing on the wing of the plane, his hands glowing with a steady blue flame as the sun begins to set behind the trees. Leaving the crash site, Cole walks through a quiet part of the swamp where the trees are draped in long, white moss that looks like cobwebs. He encounters a woman named Nyx, who lives in a house made of driftwood and old bones. She doesn't use lightning, but she has a dark, oily power that she uses to control the swamp. She looks at Cole with a mix of curiosity and hunger, a realization that they are two sides of the same coin. This is a moment of simple and grounded connection. The atmosphere is dim and mysterious, a realization that the South has its own kinds of heroes and its own kinds of monsters. He feels the warmth of her small fire on his face and the softness of the dirt under his boots. This part of the history is a realization that to save New Marais, he might have to work with people who don't follow the rules of the world above the mud. The experience in the swamp district ends with Cole standing at the edge of the deep water, looking back toward the lights of the city. The mud and the vines have taught him that the world is much older and much more dangerous than the stone streets of Empire City. He carries the weight of the blast core he recovered and the memory of the creatures that are starting to hunt him. The atmosphere is one of quiet and steady resolve, a realization that the infection is spreading faster than he thought. He is no longer just a warrior of the streets. he is a part of the wild. The focus now shifts to the industrial docks and the secrets of the man named Bertrand. Cole prepares himself for the next step of the journey, listening to the soft, rhythmic splashing of the tide against the shore. The final legacy of the swamp is a story of the light that stays bright even when it is surrounded by the dark. You have seen the warrior walk through the mud and the rot to find the strength within his own soul. You have felt the sting of the acid and the weight of the humid air. As the green light of the marsh fades into a deep, purple evening, and the story of the 3rd District begins to take shape, you feel a sense of simple and sacred purpose. The journey has brought him to a place of nature and change, and he is ready to see what is hidden in the machines of the port. Cole steps away from the water, his boots making a soft, squelching sound on the ground as he heads back toward the city, ready to carry the lightning into the heart of the enemy. The journey moves away from the green shadows of the swamp and enters the industrial port, a world of rusted iron, massive shipping cranes, and metal towers that puff out thick, black smoke into the humid sky. This is the place where the money for the militia is made, a region of the city that never sleeps and always hums with the sound of heavy work. This part of the history is a story of the big machines, a realization that Joseph Bertrand is not just a leader of men, but a man who controls the flow of everything that comes in and out of the South. The air here is heavy and tastes of grease, coal, and the sharp, hot scent of scorched metal. The sound of the world is a constant, low grinding of gears, and the deep thrum of the gas pumps that vibrate through the soles of your boots. Cole walks along the high metal catwalks, his hands brushing against the cold steel railings as he looks down at the maze of shipping containers below. He realizes that while the swamp was a place of nature, the port is a place where men try to bend the world to their will. The walk through the container yard is a story of the narrow path. The ground is covered in stacks of metal boxes that reach 3 stories high, creating a labyrinth where an enemy could be hiding behind every corner. Cole has to stay high up, grinding along the power lines that connect the cranes like silver threads. This is a moment of total and grounded focus. The only sound is the whistling of the wind through the crane cables and the soft, rhythmic clicking of his own boots on the metal rungs of a ladder. He feels the heat of the machinery on his skin and the steady vibration of the port's heartbeat in his chest. This part of the history is a realization that in the industrial world, power is something you have to take. He finds a massive electrical substation near the main gate and drains the current, feeling the surge of energy move through his shoulders and settle in his hands. The blue light of the electricity reflects off the wet metal, turning the dark yard into a shimmering world of blue and gray. In the center of the docks, Cole finds himself in a battle against the heavy machinery of the militia. They have set up automated turrets and armored vehicles that patrol the roads between the warehouses, firing at anything that moves without a permit. The fight is a story of the spark against the iron. The turrets fire bursts of red light that chew through the wooden crates and turn the concrete into dust. Cole has to use his grenades to disable the sensors, watching as the machines spark and die in a cloud of white smoke. He has to decide if he will destroy the fuel lines to take out the soldiers, or find a way to keep the port standing so the people can have their jobs back later. The sound of the metal tearing and the rockets whistling through the air is a sharp, frantic noise that keeps his mind sharp. When the battle is over, the yard is filled with the smell of burnt rubber and the quiet hiss of escaping steam. The journey leads to a massive refinery tower where the militia is keeping a secret stash of blast cores and experimental weapons. This is a place of white lights and clean floors that feels very different from the rusted world outside. Cole climbs the side of the tower, his fingers finding grips on the cold pipes and the thick, rubberized cables. He hears the humming of the cooling fans and the bubbling of strange liquids inside the glass tanks. This part of the history is a story of the hidden cost. He realizes that Bertrand is using the city's resources to build an army that can fight not just Cole, but the beast itself. The air is still and tastes like ozone and expensive chemicals. Cole looks out over the water from the top of the tower, seeing the lights of the city flickering in the distance. He feels the hardness of the steel under his boots and the weight of the responsibility he carries. Deep in the heart of the refinery, Cole encounters a new kind of enemy, a soldier wearing a suit made of powered armor that can absorb his lightning. The fight is a story of the man against the machine. The soldier moves with a heavy, clanking grace, using a hammer of pure energy to smash the walkways and the walls. Cole has to stay fast, using his static thrusters to hover over the gaps and firing concentrated bolts into the joints of the armor. The atmosphere is hot and frantic, with the sound of alarms ringing and metal clashing. He uses a massive pulse of power to short-circuit the suit's battery, watching as the soldier falls to his knees and the armor goes dark. The sound of the final spark is a deep and resonant pop that clears the room. When the smoke settles, Cole is left standing in the wreckage of the lab, his hands glowing with a steady blue light as he recovers another blast core from the ruins. Leaving the refinery, Cole walks through a quiet part of the port where the old fishing boats are tied up to the rotting piers. He encounters a group of dockworkers who are hiding in a warehouse, their faces tired and covered in the soot of the day's work. They look at him with a mix of relief and wonder, knowing that the man from the north is the only one standing up to the boss. He reaches out and touches a broken generator on a small boat, giving it a gentle jolt of energy until the engine hums to life and the lights begin to glow. This is a moment of simple and grounded kindness. The atmosphere is calm and soft, a realization that even in a place of machines, the people are what matter. He feels the cool breeze from the ocean on his face and the roughness of the old ropes under his hands. This part of the history is a realization that every light he turns on is a small victory against the darkness. The experience in the industrial port ends with Cole standing at the very end of a long pier, looking across the bay at the final part of the city. The rust and the fire have taught him that the real power of New Marais is hidden in the places where no one wants to look. He carries the weight of the new blast core and the knowledge that Bertrand is more dangerous than he first thought. The atmosphere is one of quiet and steady resolve, a realization that the path to the end is getting shorter. He is no longer just a messenger or a survivor. He is the champion of the broken city. The focus now shifts to the flooded streets of the next district and the secrets of the First Son's old technology. Cole prepares himself for the next step of the journey, listening to the soft, rhythmic splashing of the tide against the shore. The final legacy of the port is a story of the light that stays bright even when the air is thick with smoke. You have seen the warrior walk through the machines and the fire to find the strength within his own spirit. You have felt the sting of the metal and the weight of the secret. As the black smoke of the port fades into a deep, purple evening, and the story of the 4th District begins to take shape, you feel a sense of simple and sacred purpose. The journey has brought him to a place of industry and power, and he is ready to see what is hidden in the flooded streets ahead. Cole steps away from the water, his boots making a solid sound on the wood as he heads back toward the city, ready to follow the lightning into the heart of the storm. The journey moves beyond the solid iron of the port and enters the district of Flood Town, a place where the city has been swallowed by the rising tide. This is a region of Empire City that looks like a world of ruins floating on a mirror of black water, where the streets are gone and the only way forward is across the rooftops. This part of the history is a story of the Great Flood, a realization that the levees have failed, and the people who stay here have had to build a new life in the air. The air here is cool and tastes of salt, wet wood, and the damp smell of stagnant pools. The sound of the world is a constant, low rushing of water through the broken windows, and the soft, rhythmic creaking of the wooden walkways that connect the houses like spider webs. Cole stands on a tilted chimney, his boots finding a steady grip on the old bricks as he looks out over the sea of sunken rooftops. He realizes that while the port was about heavy machines, Flood Town is about the struggle of people who have lost everything but the ground beneath their feet. The walk through the sunken neighborhood is a story of the careful balance. The ground is a trap made of deep water that carries a lethal charge from the broken power lines, making every jump a test of focus. Cole has to stay high up, using the clotheslines and the telephone wires to zip between the buildings like a bird of lightning. This is a moment of total and grounded focus. The only sound is the whistling of the wind through the open rafters and the soft, hollow thud of his own movement on the shingles. He feels the humidity on his skin and the steady vibration of the city's heart in his chest. This part of the history is a realization that in a world of water, the spark is both a gift and a curse. He finds a small, dry transformer on top of a flooded grocery store and drains the current, feeling the surge of power move through his shoulders and settle in his hands. The blue light of the electricity reflects off the dark water below, turning the ruins into a shimmering world of silver and shadow. In the middle of the district, Cole finds himself in a battle against the remnants of the militia, who are using speedboats to patrol the flooded streets. They use heavy machine guns to tear through the wooden walls of the shacks, trying to drive the survivors out into the open. The fight is a story of the spark against the tide. Cole has to stay on the move, firing bolts of lightning into the water to disable the boat engines, and using his shockwaves to push the soldiers back into the deep. He has to decide if he will use his energy to power up the old medical clinics on the rooftops, or if he will focus only on clearing the path to the next blast core. The sound of the metal tearing and the water splashing is a sharp, frantic noise that echoes through the empty buildings. When the battle is over, the district is filled with the smell of wet gunpowder and the quiet hiss of escaping air. The journey leads to a massive, half-sunken cathedral where the survivors have built a fortress out of old furniture and scrap metal. This is a place of flickering candles and quiet prayers that feels like a sanctuary in the middle of a nightmare. Cole climbs the side of the stone tower, his fingers finding grips on the mossy gargoyles and the cold iron crosses. He hears the soft singing of the people inside and the low, constant roar of the water rushing through the basement. This part of the history is a story of the hidden hope. He realizes that even when the world is sinking, people will find a way to stand together. The air is still and tastes like incense and old paper. Cole looks out over the flood from the top of the spire, seeing the red glow of the beast on the horizon. He feels the hardness of the stone under his boots and the weight of the city's future on his back. Deep in the heart of the cathedral ruins, Cole encounters a new monster, a giant creature made of ice and twisted bone that has been created by the spreading infection. The fight is a story of the lightning against the frost. The creature moves with a heavy, freezing grace, throwing shards of ice that turn the air into a blur of white needles. Cole has to stay fast, using his thrusters to hover over the gaps in the floor and firing concentrated bolts into the creature's frozen heart. The atmosphere is cold and frantic, with the sound of ice shattering and stone cracking. He uses a massive pulse of power to melt the creature's defenses, watching as the ice turns to steam and the monster falls back into the dark water. The sound of the final crack is a deep and resonant snap that clears the room. When the smoke settles, Cole is left standing in the wreckage, his hands glowing with a steady blue flame. Leaving the sanctuary, Cole walks through a quiet part of the district where the trees are submerged up to their branches, looking like hands reaching out of the water. He encounters a small group of children who are fishing from a balcony, their faces thin and tired, but still full of a strange kind of curiosity. They look at him as if he is a ghost from the old world. He reaches out and touches a broken street lamp that is hanging over the water, giving it a gentle jolt of energy. until the bulb glows with a warm, yellow light. This is a moment of simple and grounded kindness. The atmosphere is calm and soft, a realization that even in a place of tragedy, a small spark can make the night feel less lonely. He feels the cool breeze from the ocean on his face and the roughness of the wet wood under his hands. This part of the history is a realization that every light he brings back to the city is a promise that the sun will rise again. The experience in Flood Town ends with Cole standing at the very edge of a collapsed bridge, looking across the water at the final part of the city. The water and the ruins have taught him that the strength of a man is measured by what he is willing to carry for others. He carries the weight of the new blast core and the knowledge that the world is changing faster than he can stop it. The atmosphere is one of quiet and steady resolve, a realization that the path to the end is getting closer. He is no longer just a messenger or a survivor. He is the bridge between the old world and the new. The focus now shifts to the final district and the ultimate confrontation with the man who started it all. Cole prepares himself for the next step of the journey, listening to the soft, rhythmic splashing of the tide against the shore. The final legacy of Flood Town is a story of the light that stays bright even when it is surrounded by the deep. You have seen the warrior walk through the ruins and the water to find the strength within his own spirit. You have felt the sting of the cold and the weight of the choice. As the gray mist of the district fades into a deep, purple evening, and the story of the sixth part begins to take shape, you feel a sense of simple and sacred purpose. The journey has brought him to a place of loss and life, and he is ready to see what is hidden in the final towers. Cole steps away from the edge, his boots making a solid sound on the stone as he heads back toward the light, ready to follow the lightning into the heart of the storm. The journey moves beyond the rising waters of Flood Town and enters the gasworks, the final industrial stronghold of New Marais. This is a world of massive iron cylinders, tangled pipes, and towers that pierce the humid sky like the teeth of a giant. This part of the history is a story of the final forge, a realization that Joseph Bertrand has turned the city's energy against itself to create a private army. The air here is thick and tastes of oil, hot copper, and the dry, chemical scent of the gas. The sound of the world is a constant, rhythmic clanging of metal on metal, and the deep, low roar of the furnaces that makes the ground beneath your boots tremble. Cole stands on a high catwalk, his hands feeling the vibration of the machinery as he looks down at the sea of rusted tanks. He realizes that while the other districts were about survival, the gasworks is about the raw power that will either save the world or burn it down. The walk through the refinery yard is a story of the heavy path. The ground is a maze of moving parts and high-pressure valves that hiss with white steam, making every step a gamble against the heat. Cole has to stay high, using the massive cranes and the thick power cables to navigate above the soldiers who patrol the floor. This is a moment of total and grounded focus. only sound is the whistling of the wind through the steel rafters and the soft, electrical crackle of his own movement along the wires. He feels the scorching heat of the pipes on his skin and the steady, heavy beat of his heart in his chest. This part of the history is a realization that in the heart of the machine, the man must be the strongest gear. He finds a high-voltage generator sitting atop a fuel silo and drains the spark, feeling the surge of energy move through his shoulders and settle in his hands. The blue light of the electricity reflects off the polished iron, turning the dark refinery into a glowing world of sapphire and coal. In the center of the district, Cole finds himself in a battle against the elite ice soldiers, men who have been changed by the technology to control the cold. They use frozen shields and pillars of ice to block the roads, turning the hot industrial yard into a freezing battlefield. The fight is a story of the lightning against the frost. The soldiers fire shards of ice that ring out like glass when they hit the metal walls, creating a blur of white in the dark air. Cole has to stay fast, using his shockwaves to shatter the frozen barriers and tossing grenades of energy to melt the defenses. He has to decide if he will drain the power from the city's main cooling system to boost his strength, or leave it running to prevent a massive explosion in the gas lines. The sound of the ice breaking and the electricity snapping is a sharp, frantic noise that echoes through the towers. When the battle is over, the yard is filled with the smell of ozone and the quiet sound of dripping water as the ice begins to thaw. The journey leads to the top of the main processing tower, a massive structure of black steel where Joseph Bertrand is hiding the final blast core. This is a place of white-hot lights and humming computers that feels like the center of a spider web. Cole climbs the side of the tower, his fingers finding grips on the cold iron rungs and the thick, rubber-coated cables. He hears the mechanical groaning of the elevators and the high-pitched whine of the cooling fans. This part of the history is a story of the hidden truth. He realizes that Bertrand is not just a man with a plan, but a monster who has used the people of New Marais as fuel for his own evolution. The air is still and tastes like copper and old blood. Cole looks out over the city from the top of the tower, seeing the red glow of the beast finally reaching the edge of the bay. He feels the hardness of the metal under his boots and the weight of the choice he is about to make. Deep in the heart of the tower, Cole encounters a massive mechanical guardian, a machine built by the first sons that uses gravity to pull the metal from the walls and throw it like spears. The fight is a story of the spark against the gravity. The machine moves with a slow, grinding power, creating waves of force that try to crush Cole against the floor. He has to stay in the air, using his static thrusters to hover over the beams and firing concentrated bolts into the machine's glowing core. The atmosphere is heavy and frantic, with the sound of metal tearing and alarms screaming. He uses a massive pulse of power to overload the machine's circuits, watching as the blue sparks fly and the guardian falls into the dark pit below. The sound of the final crash is a deep and resonant boom that shakes the whole tower. When the smoke settles, Cole is left standing in the wreckage, his hands glowing with a steady blue flame. Leaving the tower, Cole walks through a quiet part of the port where the old warehouses have been turned into shelters for the workers who escaped the fighting. He encounters a group of men who are trying to fix a broken water pump, their faces covered in the grime of the refinery, but their eyes full of a tired hope. He reaches out and touches the rusted metal of the pump, giving it a gentle jolt of energy until the engine hums to life and the clean water begins to flow. This is a moment of simple and grounded peace. The atmosphere is calm and soft, a realization that even in a place of fire and iron, a small act of kindness is the most powerful thing there is. He feels the cool breeze from the river on his face and the roughness of the metal under his hands. This part of the history is a realization that every person he helps is a reason to keep fighting. The experience in the gas works ends with Cole standing at the very top of a crane, looking toward the horizon where the sky is turning a dark, bloody red. The machines and the ice have taught him that the world is more fragile than it looks, and that power is only as good as the hand that holds it. He carries the weight of the final blast core and the knowledge that the beast is finally here. The atmosphere is one of quiet and steady resolve, a realization that the path to the end has reached its final stretch. He is no longer just a survivor or a hero. He is the only thing standing between the world and the ash. The focus now shifts to the final battle on the shore and the ultimate choice that will decide the fate of humanity. Cole prepares himself for the final step, listening to the soft, rhythmic splashing of the tide against the pier. The final legacy of the gasworks is a story of the light that stays bright even when the world is made of shadow and steel. You have seen the warrior walk through the fire and the frost to find the strength within his own heart. You have felt the sting of the metal and the weight of the secret. As the black smoke of the refinery fades into a deep, purple evening, and the story of the seventh part begins to take shape, you feel a sense of simple and sacred purpose. The journey has brought him to the heart of the machine, and he is ready to see it through to the end. Cole steps away from the edge, his boots making a solid sound on the metal as he heads back toward the light, ready to face the storm with the lightning in his hand. Gemini said, "The journey moves to the final shoreline of New Marais, where the white sand of the beach meets the dark, rising waves of the bay. This is the moment where the waiting ends and the true storm begins. The sky has turned a deep, bruised purple, and the horizon is glowing with a steady, red heat that looks like a forest fire on the water. This part of the history is a story of the final gathering, a realization that every path Cole has walked the streets of the north, the mud of the swamp, and the iron of the ports has led to this single stretch of sand. The air here is hot and tastes of salt, sulfur, and the dry scent of a coming lightning strike. The sound of the world is a low, constant vibration that you feel in your teeth. The sound of the beast's footsteps shaking the very foundation of the earth. Cole stands at the edge of the water, his fingers buzzing with a blue light that is the only cool thing in a world that is starting to melt. He realizes that he is no longer just a man. He is the shield that the city is hiding behind. The walk along the seawall is a story of the final look back. The ground is covered in the debris of the city, broken pieces of boardwalk, tangled fishing nets, and the empty shells of the swamp. Cole has to move with a steady focus, checking the defenses that his friends have built to slow down the monster. This is a moment of total and grounded reflection. The only sound is the rhythmic crashing of the waves and the high-pitched whistle of the wind through the gaps in the stone. He feels the scorching heat of the horizon on his skin and the pressure of the heavy air in his lungs. This part of the history is a realization that every choice he made along the way has brought him here, either as a savior or a king. He finds an old, industrial power bank near the pier and drains the current, feeling the surge of energy settle in his chest like a warm weight. The blue light from his hands turns the white sand into a glowing field of silver, showing the footprints of the world that is about to change forever. In the center of the beach, Cole faces the first wave of the beast's influence. It isn't just the monster itself, but the way the world breaks apart around it, throwing pieces of the earth into the sky and turning the air into a sea of sparks. The fight is a story of the spark against the sun. The beast is so large now that it blocks out the stars, a mountain of lava and shadow that walks with the weight of 1,000 years. Cole has to stay fast, using the wooden pillars of the pier to launch himself into the air, firing massive bolts of lightning that look like tiny needles against the red hide of the monster. The sound of the lightning hitting the heat is a sharp, deafening snap that clears the smoke for just a second. He has to decide if he will use his last bit of strength to protect the evacuation boats, or if he will save it all for the strike that might end it. When the first clash is over, the beach is quiet, the only sound being the hiss of the water hitting the hot sand. The journey leads to the deck of a small wooden boat where Cole meets his friends for the last time. This is where the RFI, the device that can end the plague, sits in a metal case, glowing with a soft gold light. This part of the history is a story of the final conversation. Cole hears the voices of Zeke, Q, and Nix as they talk about the future, realizing that they all have different ideas of what saving the world really means. The air is still and tastes like ozone and copper. Cole looks at the device and feels its pulse, a realization that the power to fix everything is also the power to destroy the people he has become. He feels the vibration of the boat's engine in his feet and the cold spray of the sea on his face. This part of the history is a realization that he is the only one who can turn the key. Deep in the heart of the bay, the beast makes its final push toward the city center. The fight is a story of the lightning against the world. Cole has to navigate through a storm of flying cars and falling buildings, using his static thrusters to stay above the fire. atmosphere is loud and frantic, with the sound of the ocean boiling and the earth screaming as it is torn apart. He uses a massive pulse of power to create a path through the debris, watching as the blue light cuts through the red smoke like a knife. The sound of the beast's roar is a deep and resonant boom that shakes the very soul. When the dust settles for a moment, Cole is left standing on a floating piece of the bridge, his hands glowing with a steady blue flame as he prepares his heart for the final act. Leaving the battle for a moment, Cole walks through a quiet part of the shoreline where the water is still calm. He encounters a group of survivors who are sitting in a circle, singing a soft song to keep the fear away. They don't look at the fire in the sky, they look at each other. This is a moment of simple and grounded humanity. The atmosphere is calm and somber, a realization that the world is made of these small moments of peace. He reaches out and touches a broken street lamp on the pier, giving it a gentle jolt of energy until the bulb glows with a warm, steady light. He feels the cool breeze on his face and the roughness of the old wood under his hands. This part of the history is a realization that he is fighting for the right of these people to have one more morning. The experience of the final day ends with Cole standing at the very end of the long pier, looking directly into the eyes of the monster. The fire and the water have taught him that the only thing that matters is the choice you make when there is nothing left to lose. He carries the weight of the entire world in his hands and the memory of everyone he has lost since the first day in the crater. The atmosphere is one of quiet and steady resolve, a realization that the journey is over. He is no longer just a man with lightning. He is the final answer to the question the world has been asking. The focus now shifts to the final activation and the ultimate fate of the conduits. Cole prepares himself for the final step, listening to the soft, rhythmic splashing of the tide against the sand. The final legacy of the shoreline is a story of the light that stays bright even when the sun is gone. You have seen the warrior walk through the fire and the sand to find the strength within his own spirit. You have felt the sting of the heat and the weight of the choice. As the red light of the beast fills the sky and the story of the seventh part reaches its end, you feel a sense of simple and sacred purpose. The journey has brought him to the very edge of everything, and he is ready to do what must be done. Cole stands his ground, his fingers tight on the device, ready to face the end with the lightning in his hand and the hope of the world in his heart. The journey reaches its final end on the deck of a small wooden boat drifting in the center of the bay. As the red fire of the beast begins to fade into the first pale light of a new morning. This is the place where the story of Cole MacGrath stops being a story of survival and becomes a story of memory. The air here is finally starting to cool, carrying the scent of salt water, wet sand, and the faint, clean smell of rain that is finally starting to fall from the dark clouds. The sound of the world is a soft, rhythmic lapping of the waves against the hull, and the distant, muffled sound of the city of Marais as it waits in the silence. Cole sits on a crate in the middle of the deck, his body feeling heavier than it ever has before. A realization that the spark he has carried since the first day in Empire City is finally reaching its limit. He looks at his hands and sees the blue light flickering like a candle in the wind. And he knows that the path has led him to the only door left to open. The final activation of the device is a story of the ultimate sacrifice. Cole holds the RFI in his lap, the metal cold and solid against his palms, knowing that turning the key will be the last thing his heart ever does. This is a moment of total and grounded peace. The atmosphere is quiet and vast, as if the entire world has stepped back to give him one last second of silence. He thinks about the long road, the rooftops of the neon, the trash heaps of the Warren, and the humid swamps of the south. The sound of the machine starting up is a low and steady hum that grows into a beautiful, ringing note that fills the entire bay. He feels the electricity being pulled out of his bones, a sensation that is not sharp or painful, but feels like a long, deep sigh after a lifetime of running. This part of the history is a realization that he was always meant to be the one who stood in the gap between the dark and the light. The blue energy leaves his body in a massive wave, spreading across the ocean and the land like a new sunrise. As the light from the device travels around the globe, the atmosphere shifts to one of universal healing. You see the people in the hospitals and the streets suddenly standing up, the black marks of the plague fading from their skin as if they were never there. The beast, the giant creature of shadow and fire, dissolves into a cloud of warm, white ash that the wind carries away into the deep water. This is the era of the human return, where the world is given back to the people who were afraid of the storm. The sound of the wind through the city's broken buildings is a soft and musical chord, a sign that the fever has finally broken. Cole lies back on the deck of the boat, his eyes looking up at the sky as the thick smoke finally breaks apart to show the deep, steady blue of the morning. He feels the hardness of the wood under his back and the warmth of the sun on his face, a feeling of total and absolute completion. The journey leads to the final memory held by his friend Zeke, who is the only one left to carry the warrior back to the shore. Zeke walks through the crowds of people who are crying and laughing at the same time, their eyes clear and their breath easy. This part of the history is the story of the true hero's reward. Zeke doesn't say many words as he places a simple lightning bolt marker on a grave overlooking the sea, a realization that the greatest stories are the ones that don't need to be explained. The air is still and carries the taste of fresh earth and blooming jasmine. The sound of the waves hitting the beach is a rhythmic and comforting thrum, making the shore feel like a place where the work is finally done. Cole's story has become a part of the city's heart, a realization that even though the lightning has stopped, the light he brought will never go out as long as there is a child who remembers his name. Leaving the grave behind, the story moves through the years as the city of New Marais begins to grow again. You see the new houses being built with the wood from the swamp, and the new docks made of the iron from the port. The people never forget the man who gave his life to give them a tomorrow. They tell the story of the messenger who became a king, and then chose to be a man again. This is a moment of quiet and grounded legacy. The atmosphere is bright and steady, a realization that the sacrifice was the seed that grew into the peace they now enjoy. The sound of the city life, the kids playing in the fountains, the music in the plazas, and the boats in the harbor is the song that Cole died to keep playing. He has become a legend that watches over the coast, a story that people tell when the sky turns gray and the first rolls of thunder begin to shake the windows. The walk through the final memory is a story of the spark that remains. Even though the device was meant to take all the powers away, there is still a feeling in the air during a storm that makes people look up and smile. This is a moment of raw and mysterious hope. The atmosphere is soft and electric, a realization that some things are too strong to be fully ended by a machine. You feel the lightness of the spirit and the steady beat of the world's heart as you reach the very end of the history. This part of the history is a realization that Cole MacGrath was not just a warrior with lightning in his hands. He was the proof that anyone can choose to be better than the world expects them to be. The sound of a single, sudden bolt of lightning hitting the water in the distance is a sharp and final note, a sign that the story has reached its home. The experience of the final journey ends with a view of the city at night, the lights of the houses twinkling like 1,000 small stars reflected in the bay. The lightning of the hero has led to a sovereignty of the quiet night. He carries the weight of the past into the peace of the future. The atmosphere is one of quiet and absolute resolution, a realization that the path of the lightning man has found its final resting place. The history of the blast and the beast finds its final and grounded resolution in the steady breathing of a world that is no longer afraid of the dark, leaving behind the war for a world of simple human life. The story is over, and the lightning is finally at rest. The final legacy of Cole MacGrath is a story of the beauty in the choice to give everything for people you will never meet. You have seen the warrior walk through the fire, the mud, and the shadow to find the strength within his own soul. You have felt the sting of the heat and the weight of the future. As the blue light of the memory settles into your mind and the story of the South fades into the long, peaceful sleep of the night, you feel a sense of simple and sacred purpose. The journey has brought you through the storm and back to the calm, and now you carry the spark within yourself. The city is quiet, the sky is clear, and the story is finally yours to keep.